Our next presenter works at Braintree, bringing awesome payment APIs to the world. He's answered hundreds of Python questions on Stack Overflow and so released many code snippets out into the world, as well as helped stumped engineers everywhere. He's also an active member of ChiPy and Chicago Python Users Group. Please welcome Adam Forsyth.
Hi, how's it going? I'm going to talk about Stack Overflow and how to use it to your and the community's best advantage. I do work at Braintree, also Venmo, same company, so the shirt is not advertising somebody else. If you want to find these slides after the talk, not sure why, they are on GitHub, the original version of the talk, and the updated version will be there by tomorrow. Stack Overflow is really an amazing site. It's at its core, it is Q&A about programming. It does a lot of different things in order to add the most value over some of the sites that went before, like Exchange. Like Wikipedia, it is editable by anyone. Anybody can suggest and edit to content on the site, and once you reach a certain level of reputation on the site, you can just go and edit any answer you'd like. Like Dig and Reddit, it does have a ranking system, a rating system, so that the best content rises to the top. It's very good at answers that don't change. It's a little harder to handle the fact that the best answer may change over time, but it does a great job in most situations. It's like a forum in that you can comment on other people's question and answers. It's generally intended that those comments are there to solicit better information, not to really discuss in a broader sense the topic. And it is like a blog. I and many other people have both asked and answered their own question. So if you're writing a blog post that you could phrase as, I'm going to ask a question that poses a problem and then I'm going to solve it, then you could really put it as a Stack Overflow question and answer, which allows the whole community to contribute to it, just as if you were to write an article on Wikipedia rather than on your blog. It uses the CC by SA license, which is an amazing thing. This is a license that means anybody can take the work on the site and use it for any purpose, so long as they use a same or similar license for their own work, and also so long as they provide attribution to the original authors. It's also a non-revocable license, which means that even though somebody might delete their account or their content from Stack Overflow, that license is irrevocable, so the community always will have access to that. Stack Exchange, the company behind Stack Overflow, dumps all the data on the site like once a quarter. There are other places that mirror all of the questions and answers. So this information is never going away, even if the company behind the site does go away. And it really does make contributing to Stack Overflow like contributing to any open source software, because it shares a very similar type of license. There's a lot of reasons to use Stack Overflow. These are sort of my top three. The number one is just that it is the best. Not only does it have like the greatest resource of programming knowledge over a broad range of topics that exists anywhere, but the community is incredible. The people who ask questions there, the people who answer, and the tone and focus is just unparalleled. So that's always the number one reason to use a product, is that it is the best out there. Contributing to it helps everyone. I have asked a fairly obscure, not that interesting question about something with the Django admin, and the post has over 2,500 views. So it can help a lot of people, even if your answer is something fairly specific, that your question is something fairly specific that doesn't necessarily have a super broad audience. This allows everyone to find that information in a way that posting to a mailing list or a forum specific to a much narrower topic doesn't get that information out there. It will make you a better programmer. Stack Overflow has several things about it that really do this more than just sort of generally answering questions. I'm going to talk a little more about that now. It's working with open source software and contributing to it makes you a better programmer, because you get to read other people's awesome code. You get feedback from awesome coders in a way that A lot of people don't at work, and especially I found when I was working for myself, I didn't get feedback on a day-to-day basis, and Stack Overflow is a great way to supplement that. It also does have an element of competition, which really drives you to learn. If you want your contribution to be recognized, you really have to, there is competition between other people who also want that recognition, and that really drives you to answer better, learn how to solve problems faster, and other things that will help you in other work. So there's 3 core ways of contributing to Stack Overflow. The first one is obviously answering questions. You don't have to be an expert. There's lots of beginner questions. There's lots of homework questions being asked on the site. You really should feel free to contribute. I really encourage everyone to. But possibly more important is the need for good questions. There are a lot of questions on Stack Overflow. There's a lot of Python questions. But really there are a lot of questions that aren't really well researched and a lot of them are on the same sort of basic things over and over again. So if you have a good question, even if it's something that you've managed to solve yourself, please post it on Stack Overflow, because that's how the resource gets better, and that's how you're able to later Google the answer when you or someone else needs it. Good questions are the #1 thing that anybody can contribute who ever writes any code. And so everyone here should really do that. It's a way of giving back. And then the third main thing is voting. It really doesn't take very much reputation on the site at all to be able to vote on questions and answers. Just if you ask a couple or answer a couple of questions, you'll be able to. And from then on, every time you Google a problem and Stack Overflow comes up, you'll be able to make sure that the best answer rises to the top and that the question is rewarded if it was helpful. And it really doesn't take much work at all to get to the point where you can vote on things, and it is incredibly helpful and a great way to give to the community without taking any extra time beyond already what you're doing to search for and find questions. So not every question is a good fit for Stack Overflow. There are a lot of questions for recommendations or opinions that just aren't a good fit for the site. Part of what makes it so useful is that it's narrowly focused. It's intended for factual answers to specific questions that are about real problems you're actually facing. So if you can say, I tried X, and here's my code, and it doesn't work, and I can't figure out why, and here's a little piece of code you can run to replicate the problem, that's a great question. If it's something that you would probably do on a whiteboard with a box diagram or something, it might not be the right site because that's less concrete and less answerable in a short form. So Python is one of the most popular topics on Stack Overflow. These are the stats from yesterday. So over 2,000 questions in the last week, of which unfortunately 36% went unanswered. This number has been climbing. There's a lot of answerable questions out there that just take a little more work that aren't getting answered, so everybody should do their part and make sure that question never needs to get asked again. There's 200,000 questions in all time in Python, which puts it in the top 10 subjects overall. So here's an example Python question. I picked this entirely at random. Some guy named Nick Coughlin, I don't know who that is, answered this question, asked this question, and it's a really good example of a detailed question that has code in it. He explains what he needs in one line in the title, and then proceeds to tell what's not working. Is my laptop. What's not working about the code that he has so far. And he later edited more information into the question. I've cut it here for brevity. So here's an entirely randomly, okay, it's not good. Here's an entirely randomly chosen answer to that question that I posted. And it's not the best answer, but it is an example. I get right to the answer, right to the code that solves the problem. And I could tell by the question that the person asking it was relatively experienced, so I didn't need to go into a lot of explanation about what I was doing. Clearly he would understand generator expressions and know what string join was. But in general, this answer could use more explanation because it's supposed to be useful for everybody, not just the person who asked the question. But it gives the general idea of what a question and answer look like. When I was first talking about giving this talk with people in Chicago, one of the top things that came up, and something that a few people who are in the audience who I've talked to over the last few days have mentioned is every question seems like it's either really esoteric and will take a lot of work to figure out what the answer is, or else it's just answered in an instant. There are a lot of things you can do to find questions to answer. First of all, just don't be intimidated. The people who are answering these questions really fast don't know everything. They just know how to find the answer out fast. That's not the same as being a master of all things Python. Don't use the main page. Don't just go to stackoverflow.com and look for questions. That page doesn't auto-update. It just sits there. If you go to basically any other page on the site, like the page for all the Python questions even, the page will update itself every time a new post is made or somebody answers a question or edits a question. So just make a bookmark with a list of the tags that you like to answer questions in, like questions/tag/Python or Django or Python 2.6 or Flask, and just put a long ORD list of everything you care about and related to coding. And that's it. Just pin it tab and leave it open, and that little tab will, if you're in Firefox, it'll turn blue when the page updates, and you can click over and see what's going on and see if it's a question you'd like to answer. And that allows you to get to the question first, rather than, it seeming like every question is always answered. You'll see them when they're first posted. A good Stack Overflow answer includes code almost every time. Really important in a lot of cases is a step-by-step solution, walking through how you arrived at the code and or what the code does step by step. Like if you're using some algorithm, describing how it works is really important. A high-level description of the concepts can be really useful. A lot of people maybe aren't familiar with combinatorics or don't understand how a prime sieve, like why your prime sieve works when it looks to them like you're skipping all these numbers that you should have to check. And then links to external resources is, I think, something that needs to be used way more on Stack Overflow. I like to link to the Python documentation and probably 50% of the answers I give and pull out an excerpt so that not only do you have a reference that's always going to be there, but in case that URL ever would break, you can copy paste that excerpt into Google and still find the full page. So if you're looking to get some reputation on Stack Overflow, if you're looking to be rewarded, if you're looking to get your answers up there so that people in the community can find them, pretend you're a lean, hungry startup who just doesn't have a lot of money and just needs to get something out there and get a revenue stream started. Write the minimum viable answer like you'd build the minimum viable product. Put some working, properly formatted code in there, and that's it pretty much. Post it. And then iterate. Follow up by adding comments about the code you've written, describe the concepts, add links, all those things that were on the previous slide. So you don't have to have that all right away. And Stack Overflow, to a certain extent, penalizes later answers, but there's a good grace period built in there after you first post yours where you can edit it without it affecting the time, essentially, that the answer is considered to have been posted. Be selective. You're more likely to both be rewarded and contribute to the community in a measurable way if you answer good questions. Good questions are going to tend to get linked to more. They're going to tend to be followed up on better and attract more other good answers. So there's going to be more eyes on that. You're going to get more reputation, and more people are going to get value from it. There's also a lot of posts that have an almost there answer that is pretty much the right idea. There's not really a point in posting your own answer then. That other answer is going to attract a bunch of votes. Post a comment on it, edit it, make that answer better instead, rather than spending the time to write your own. If a question also already has an accepted answer, it's going to not get a lot more views at all the answers other than that one. So if the person who asked the question has already said, okay, this is the answer for me, it's generally not worth posting another answer unless that one is truly out of date. Otherwise, it's always better to just edit more information into it. If you want to learn, you're not focused learning, but if you want to treat Stack Overflow like a source of ideas for things to look into with a goal, like, taking a course in university, you have a homework problem that you have to solve, so it's directed learning. It helps you stay focused, but so long as you don't have a real narrow topic you want to learn about, you can do that really well on Stack Overflow. Do the opposite of what you would do if you were just going for reputation. Write a really complete answer. Address all aspects of the question. Figure out the why. Go back and forth with the original poster to figure out what the real problem is that they're trying to solve. There's something called the A-B problem, where the person asks question A, but what they really need to know is the answer to some other question B. Identifying that can be incredibly useful to the community, to the person asking the question, and also it helps you talk about and think about the problems you're trying to solve at work or wherever you're coding better, because that happens to me, that happens to all of us. We spend a lot of time answering the wrong question. And this is a great way to learn how to identify when that's happening. And then just answer everything. Research, it doesn't matter if you know about it. I remember one particular instance where I spent half an hour trying to figure out the answer to a question about the Twitter API that was getting a lot of attention but was unanswered. And I learned a lot about the Twitter API, and there are different levels and permissions, and it was useful to me, it was useful to the community. It's really, but you're not going to get rewarded the same way because it takes so much more time investment. A lot of times I do answer questions without actually running the code I post, because it's very simple. I'm pretty sure that it's going to be correct. But if you really want to make sure that you're learning, test your code, figure out where it's going to break, what its limits are. And just don't be afraid to post, even if someone else has answered the question in the meantime. If your goal is to learn, get something out there, and maybe it'll get comments, maybe it won't, but there's a lot of more opportunity for you to get feedback. Here's a few tips that are bleeding off the edge of the page for answering Python questions. First of all, there's a lot of Unicode questions that boil down to adding .encode UTF-8 to the end. I would encourage you to let people know, but also please link to an existing question and answer on that topic rather than just adding more and more duplicates. I feel like this is something that I've got a lot of reputation doing, is basically saying, yeah, just add .encode UTF-8 and you'll be fine. This even happens with questions I answer about the open source libraries we release at work. It's like, yep, we're expecting a byte string. You need to encode that Unicode and you'll be fine. Collections and iter tools are two awesome parts of the standard library that can replace a ton of code when people are trying to do data analysis or munging data. Especially people coming in from the sciences may not realize that those tools exist, that these things are already built, and you can replace a ton of custom code and reduce the ability for errors, and it'll be faster because it's all implemented in C rather than writing a bunch of Python. Performance is something people really like to hear about. If you can say, even if there's already an answer, and you can say, okay, but that's O(n) squared, and you can do this thing that's n log n, you're going to probably get a lot of votes. People like that. And definitely describe everything with big O notation, even if it's not technically correct, even if it's, amortized or asymptotic, or I don't even know. Use big O notation because people are familiar with it, and you can give the general idea. The Python wiki's time complexity page is pretty useful to talk about sort of standard types and the time complexity of various operations on them. Read the Python data model page on the docs. This is just in general something I think every Python programmer should do. If you want to know like when magic methods are being invoked and how lots of things like descriptors work, this is a good place to start. It's very dense and extremely broad, but also really useful to understand. And don't be afraid to look at the source of Python. And I show the link to the CPython source here, but sometimes even more useful could be the source of PyPy, because it's written in Python, so if you don't read C, it's probably going to be more helpful. A lot of times there's questions like, why does the number 4 less than the string 3 in Python 2? Or why is factorial 100,000 times faster in Python 3? And the only way to answer questions like that is really just to look at the CPython source and figure out what's actually going on. These 4 things that I've just listed account for most of my highest voted answers. These are the things that really going to help a lot of people, and people find interesting and useful. There are a lot of homework questions. Learn how to answer simply. Learn how not to use jargon. It'll help you talk to your product managers at work. It'll help you talk to entrepreneurs who want to use your product, and it's really useful for students to get answers that don't assume years of experience in the world of programming. There's a lot of Django questions out there to be answered, a lot of easy Django questions. I really don't know why this is, but there is just a plethora of unanswered Django questions. I don't know what the unanswered rate is, but probably 50%. And it's a shame because a lot of those questions most people in this room could probably answer with a little bit of effort. Yeah, I encourage everybody really to answer Django questions if you're going to pick one area. So NumPy bad, I don't mean the library is bad, I mean that it takes a lot of time to write a mediocre answer if you're not an expert. I've learned a lot about it by answering NumPy questions, but eventually I did kind of stop doing that because I realized I wasn't really helping other people that much. There were other people out there who were going to be able to give a much better answer with much less effort, and in the end help everyone reading the question in the future much more. So it's if you want to learn, use Stack Overflow, but it's a lot harder to contribute usefully in a reasonable amount of time. So here's just a couple of my higher voted questions. The first one might be a little hard to see. It's a little rude. I wish I'd been a little less terse when I wrote this, but I've avoided editing it because I got a job offer apparently based on this answer. So I turned it down. I didn't want somebody to hire me because I thought I was going to be rude to people. But this is my favorite. All you have to do is add .encode UTF-8 answer. The error that they're seeing is the very first error at the very top of the Python Unicode how-to. It's super common, and hopefully Python 3 getting wider use will make that a less frequent question, but I'm not sure I believe it. This second question I think is a great example of stepping someone through a relatively complicated piece of code. I did not write this. I would never write a line of code like that, really, but I had just seen this somewhere and I saved it on my computer because I thought it was kind of clever. I explain here why square root is the boundary you use rather than half when you're finding factors of a number. I explain reduce. I use truncating division explicitly. So there's a lot of meat here for learning about how Python does things and also about the basic algorithm behind this. And then the answer at the bottom is just an example of somewhere where I've looked at the CPython source and then posted a broken link, and so replaced it with a link from a comment. But it is weird that the number 4 is less than the string 3 in Python 2. And the reason is that if you compare a numeric type to some other type that doesn't know how to compare with it, it will treat the class name of the numeric type as an empty string, and then compare that against the class name of the other type. So you're comparing an empty string against the string str, and that's why 4 is less than 3. So that's an answer that I've always found very funny. It's just I would love to have been in the room when it was decided that that's how we were going to compare types in Python 2. There is a Python Django Stack Overflow clone out there called OSQA. I've never actually used it, but if you're interested in sort of getting an idea of, in general, how Stack Overflow works, this is some source code you can actually look at since the site itself is not open. It is sort of unofficially blessed by the company behind Stack Overflow. They don't care that people copy their things as long as they don't actually use any of their graphics. Yeah. I think that is it. That's the end. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, so if you have any questions, just come down to the microphone. So one of the things I found really useful in at least looking at SQL questions on Stack Overflow are the fiddle series of websites. And I know there's a SQL fiddle and a JS fiddle. Do you know what other, I guess, languages there are that have fiddles available around?
I mean, I know a lot of people link to, is it CodePen? There are certainly for Python and for Clojure and a lot of other languages. They're out there. Even a lot of compiled languages, I think, have something pretty close. Yeah, I don't know. I really have focused on two types of questions on Stack Overflow. One's about the open source software and platform released by Braintree and Python. So other than that, I'm not super knowledgeable about it. Although one thing to mention that's sort of related is you're generally not going to get the right highlighting if you try and use truncating division 2 slashes, because it treats that as a comment inside code blocks. So you need to specifically tell it that you're using Python if you are ever posting anything there and you want it to render correctly.
So I've had this experience with Stack Overflow a number of times, and I'm wondering if you'd give me some advice on it. I will discover that someone's using some code that they've found from a Stack Overflow question, and or I'll end up on a Stack Overflow question because I'm poking around, and the first answer will be wrong, and the second answer will be right. And I upvote the second answer, but as someone who uses Stack Overflow a lot, what do you do when you're confronted with a green checkbox upvoted answer that's incorrect, that's wrong? What do you do to tell people, hey, please don't do this is incorrect?
Right. So if an answer is incorrect technically, then that is where you should edit it to be technically correct. That is absolutely encouraged on the site. Everybody owns that.
Do I maybe not have enough karma to edit?
You can always suggest an edit. So long as you're logged in, I think you can suggest an edit from, I don't know, it's very, very low amount of reputation, and that's something that a lot of people will sit in the edit queue and wait for things to pop up, and you need just 2 people to basically say, yeah, this is a good edit, and the question is edited, and you'll get reputation for it. So it's like a lot of people are still just intuitively don't feel that they own every question and answer on Stack Overflow, but we all own every question and answer on Stack Overflow. You're not editing someone else's answer. It was posted by someone else, but you're editing a community-owned piece of information, just like if you were to make a bug fix to the Python documentation. Just because there's a name on it doesn't mean that you shouldn't fix it if it's wrong. Yeah, it is a problem. It's like I think I mentioned earlier that the biggest issue is when the answer isn't wrong, but what's the best answer changes. I mean, there's still answers on there from Alex Martelli when the site first launched, talking about like the Borg idiom, which only works with old style classes and is incredibly out of date, but it's not wrong. It's right for what he was talking about, but the right answer, the right way to solve that kind of problem in modern Python has changed. That's a question that's not something that Stack Overflow addresses as well, but technical incorrectness, edit it, fix it.
Thanks.
Yes. So that's the end of our question time. But join me in thanking Adam for his incredible presentation.
Thank you.